A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
I was looking through our old logs from mid-2025 the other day, Herman, and it struck me how much of our early experimentation has just evaporated into the ether. We have the finished episodes, sure, the polished final products that everyone hears. But the messy, fascinating middle bits? The parts where the model was hallucinating wildly, or taking those weird, surreal logic leaps that actually taught us how it thinks? Those are mostly gone. It feels like we are building this massive, world-changing library of digital intelligence, but we are writing all the books in disappearing ink.
It is a massive institutional blind spot, corn. I have been obsessing over this lately because we are currently in the middle of a total paradigm shift that most people are sleeping through. We used to treat AI chats like casual text messages, something ephemeral, something you glance at, get your answer, and then immediately forget. It was the Snapchatification of enterprise data. But as of March 24, 2026, that casual approach is officially a massive liability. Today's prompt from Daniel is about the critical importance of archiving AI outputs and conversations, and it really hits on why we need to move from those ephemeral, here today, gone tomorrow, chats to what the industry is finally calling active archives.
It is funny you mention liability, because the adults have officially entered the room. I saw that report from mid-March, March 16th specifically, stating that 94% of Fortune 500 procurement teams are now flat-out refusing to sign AI vendor contracts without a SOC 2 Type 2 report. That is a staggering number. It means the days of move fast and break things with black box AI are over. They are demanding a meticulous audit trail for every single model input and every single model output. No more the history expired, no more. We do not store that. If an AI makes a decision, the paper trail has to be permanent.
We are moving from the convenient chat era to the auditable artifact era. The regulatory pressure is the primary driver here. Between the European Union AI Act and ISO 42001, we have moved into a meticulous documentation paradigm. Organizations are realizing that if an AI agent makes a decision that costs a company millions or, heaven forbid, violates a privacy law, saying the chat history was deleted is not a valid legal defense. It is like a bank saying they lost the ledgers for the month of February. Yet, if you look at the major consumer interfaces right now, they still treat your history as this secondary, transient thing. They focus on the immediate generation, the wow factor of the response, not the long-term verifiable record of how that response came to be.
That disconnect is exactly where platforms like Maxim AI, BrainTrust, and PromptHub are finding their footing. They are essentially providing the versioning and production observability that the big labs just have not prioritized for the end user. It is the difference between writing on a whiteboard and using a version-controlled repository like Git. If you are a developer or a prompt engineer in 2026, you cannot just hope the model behaves the same way it did yesterday. You need to see the delta. You need to know exactly what changed between version A and version B.
And that brings us to the technical necessity of versioning, which is really the heart of the matter. We just saw the release of Gemini 3.1 Pro on February 19th, and then Gemini 3.1 Flashlight just yesterday on March 23rd. These models are incredible leaps forward from the Gemini 2.5 thinking family we were using last year. They have native computer use skills and much better multi-step problem solving. But here is the catch. When a vendor pushes an update, even a subtle one, the way the model interprets a complex prompt can shift. This is what we call model drift, and it is the silent killer of agentic workflows.
I think people underestimate how sensitive these systems are. If you do not have an archive of your previous outputs, You have no baseline to measure against. You are just guessing why your automation suddenly broke, or why your AI customer service agent started sounding slightly more aggressive. We saw this in our own transition on this show. Moving from Gemini 2.5 to 3.1 changed the very texture of how these scripts are structured. The reasoning is deeper, the nuance is sharper, but without a record of those 2.5 outputs, we would lose the ability to see the evolution of the machine's voice. We are essentially living through a fast-forward version of the history of literature, but we are failing to keep the manuscripts.
That is why the concept of a data intelligence sandbox is so compelling. The Active Archive Alliance has been pushing for this since January. The idea is that instead of just sticking data in cold storage where it goes to die and never gets looked at again, you keep it in a queryable, active environment. Imagine being able to run a semantic search across every interaction your company has had with a large language model over the last year. You could find patterns in where the reasoning fails, or identify exactly which prompts lead to the most efficient code. That is not just a backup, that is a specialized proprietary data set that is unique to your business. It is your institutional memory digitized.
Let's talk about that reasoning path for a second. With these newer models like Gemini 3.1 and GPT 5.4, which OpenAI launched on March 5th, by the way, we are seeing native computer use. This means the AI isn't just giving you text, it's taking screenshots, clicking buttons, and executing code. If an agentic AI is managing your supply chain and it makes a mistake, you don't just need the final text it produced. You need the archive of the screenshots it took, the reasoning trace it followed, and the specific clicks it made. If you lose that, you lose the ability to debug your own company's operations. It is like trying to fix a plane crash without a black box recorder.
That is a perfect analogy. And it highlights the misconception that AI outputs are just text. They are complex state logs of a digital consciousness performing a task. Treating them like a disposable chat log is a recipe for disaster. This leads into that 78% gap we keep hearing about. Most organizations, 78% according to recent surveys, have these high-minded ethical principles for AI. They talk about fairness, transparency, and bias mitigation, but they have zero operational infrastructure to enforce them. You can say you want unbiased AI all you want, but if you are not archiving and auditing the outputs, you have no idea if you are actually meeting those goals. It is all theory and no practice. You are essentially grading your own homework without showing the work.
It is a bit of a race against time, though, because the volume of data is exploding. GPT 5.4 has that 1 million token context window. Herman, for the listeners who might not be tracking the math, 1 million tokens is roughly 750,000 words. That is several thick novels worth of information in a single conversation. Archiving, that is not just a matter of saving a few kilobytes anymore. It requires a real strategy for data lifecycle management. You are essentially archiving a small library every time you have a deep session with a model like that.
And that is why we are seeing this play out on a massive cultural scale as well. It is not just about corporate compliance, it is about our collective history. I had been following the evolution of the Arena, which used to be the LMSYS chatbot arena. Since their rebrand in January, they have become the de facto living museum for AI. They are not just ranking models, they are preserving the human preference data that shows how our expectations of intelligence are shifting over time. What we thought was a brilliant, human-like response 6 months ago might look basic or even robotic today. Without those archived artifacts, we lose our sense of perspective on how fast the ceiling is rising.
Speaking of living museums, I'm really curious about Refik Anadol's Dataland project in Los Angeles. It is supposed to open this spring, and it is being framed as the first museum of AI arts. But more importantly, it is going to function as a public repository for these massive datasets. It is a physical manifestation of the idea that this data has intrinsic historical and artistic value. It is not just noise, it is the fossil record of the Silicon Age. We are going to want to look back at these early Gemini and GPT outputs, the same way we look at the first daguerreotypes or the first motion pictures.
Even the Internet Archive has stepped up. The Wayback Machine started capturing AI-generated content like ChatGPT answers and Google AI overviews late last year. They realized that the conversational history of the web is just as important as the static pages. If a significant portion of the information humans consume is being filtered through these models, we need a record of what those models were saying at any given point in history. Otherwise, we are going to have a massive hole in our cultural memory. Imagine if we didn't have a record of what newspapers said during the 20th century. That is the risk we are taking if we don't archive these AI outputs.
It reminds me of what we talked about in episode 1176 regarding computable archives. We moved from just taking pictures of documents to making them machine readable. Now, we are moving from just saving chat logs to making those logs part of an active, agentic feedback loop. If you are not versioning your prompts and your outputs, you are essentially building your business on sand. You have no way to do a regression test. If a new model comes out, say a hypothetical Gemini 4 or GPT-6, how do you know it's actually better for your specific use case if you don't have a gold standard archive of your previous successes and failures?
That is the core of the issue. A lot of people think their vendor-provided chat history is enough, but those histories are designed for consumer convenience, not enterprise compliance. They are not version controlled. They do not show you which specific submodel was used or what the latent temperature settings were. They are digital tombstones. They tell you something lived there once, but they do not give you the data you need to resurrect or replicate the result. If you want to replicate a result from 3 months ago, and the vendor has updated the model behind the scenes, you are out of luck unless you have the full technical log.
So if I am a CTO looking at my stack today, March 24th, 2026, what is the immediate move? Because it feels like the gap between the people doing this right and the people just winging it is becoming a canyon.
The first step is a total audit of your AI data pipeline. If your current tools do not allow for automated, versioned exports of every interaction, you need to look at an intermediary layer. Platforms like BrainTrust or Maxim AI are becoming essential because they sit between the user and the model, capturing everything in a structured format. You also need to adopt that data intelligence sandbox mindset. Treat your archive prompts and outputs as a training set for your future models. Your history is your most valuable asset for fine-tuning the next generation of agents.
It is also about people. We have these ethical boards, but we do not have enough AI librarians or data provenance officers. We need people whose entire job is to ensure the integrity of the institutional memory being generated by these machines. Otherwise, we are just creating a landfill of prompts, rather than a library of intelligence. I think about the impact of Gemini 3.1 flashlight, specifically. It is so fast and cheap that companies are going to use it for millions of tiny, micro interactions every day. If you do not have an automated way to archive those, you are losing millions of data points about your customers and your processes every single hour.
The scale of the loss is just mind-boggling if you are still thinking in terms of manual saving. We are moving away from the Wild West where everyone was just amazed the thing could talk, and into the accountable era where we have to prove why the thing said what it said. There is a great parallel here to the early days of software development. People used to just overwrite files and hope for the best until version control became standard. We are in the pre-Git era of AI outputs. We are finally realizing that the output is just as much a piece of code as the prompt that generated it.
And without that context, you cannot have true intelligence. You are just stuck in a perpetual present, making the same mistakes over and over because your models have no memory of their own past performance. It is a form of digital amnesia that we are choosing to inflict on ourselves. We should also mention the technical necessity of tracking those subtle, unannounced model updates. Vendors often push small optimizations that do not get a full version number change, but they can still affect the style or the safety filters of the output. If you are a creative agency using AI for brand voice, a tiny shift in the model's prose style can be a huge problem. Archiving allows you to spot those shifts immediately, rather than finding out months later that your brand voice has slowly drifted into something unrecognizable.
That is the value of those historical records Daniel's prompt mentioned. Tracking the incremental improvements is how we actually measure progress. It is easy to see the jump from Gemini 2.5 to 3.1, But the real magic is often in those small weekly updates that make the reasoning just a little bit more robust. Those are the artifacts the future historians of AI are going to be clawing for. I worry that so much of this early, formative era of AI is being lost because we are too focused on the next shiny feature. We are so excited about the 1 million token context window that we are not thinking about how to store the million tokens we generated yesterday.
It is the irony of the information age. We are generating more data than ever before, but we are also at risk of having the shortest collective memory in human history. If it is not in an active archive, it might as well not have happened. But the good news is that the infrastructure is finally catching up. Between the regulatory mandates and the rise of specialized observability platforms, the tools are there. It is now a matter of organizational will. Do you want to be the company that can prove its AI is safe and effective? Or do you want to be the one standing in court saying the logs were deleted?
I think the 94% of procurement teams have made the answer to that pretty clear. The era of the ephemeral chat is over. If you are building on AI in 2026, you are in the archiving business whether you like it or not, which is a good thing for everyone. It leads to better models, more reliable agents, and a much clearer understanding of how these systems are actually changing our world. We are finally moving past the magic trick phase and into the engineering phase.
So, for the folks listening who want to get their house in order, what is the checklist?
First, start by demanding SOC 2 Type 2 compliance from every AI vendor you work with. Do not compromise on that. Second, implement a centralized prompt management system that versions both the input and the output. Third, create a dedicated data intelligence sandbox where your team can run evaluations against historical data. And finally, stop treating your AI interactions as disposable. Treat them as the most valuable intellectual property your company is currently producing.
That is a solid roadmap. It is about moving from being a passive consumer of AI to an active steward of the intelligence you are helping to create. We are all essentially curators of our own personal and professional AI museums. And if you do it right, that museum becomes your most powerful tool for future growth. It is not just about looking back, it is about building a foundation to move forward with confidence.
It is the only way that actually scales. We cannot keep relearning the same lessons every time a model updates. We need to stand on the shoulders of our own digital history.
Well, on that note, we should probably make sure this conversation is properly archived. I would hate for our future selves to miss out on your insights, Herman.
I am sure Hilbert has it covered. He is much more organized than we are.
That is a low bar, but I will take it. This has been a fascinating dive. It is one of those topics that feels dry on the surface, but is actually fundamental to everything we are doing right now. It is the plumbing of the intelligence age. Nobody thinks about it until the pipes burst. But it is what makes the whole system possible.
It is what turns a project into an industry.
This has been a great exploration of Daniel's prompt. It really highlights how the boring stuff, the archiving, the compliance, the documentation, is actually the most revolutionary stuff in the long run. If you want to dig deeper into how we think about the evolution of these systems, check out episode 1120 where we discuss the AI handoff and the danger of losing context between agentic sessions. It ties in perfectly with this need for a robust historical record.
Thanks as always to our producer Hilbert Flemingtop for keeping the gears turning behind the scenes.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. We literally could not archive this intelligence without them.
This has been my Weird Prompts.
If you are finding these deep dives helpful, leaving a review on your podcast app is the best way to help other people find the show. We will be back soon with another prompt.
See you then.
Bye.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My weird prompts.